Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 12th episode of Retuning Your Firm. And it's a great pleasure to be your host again on this bright, sunny morning in Hertfordshire anyway. Hope it's equally nice with you guys. So what are we going to do today? First of all, I hope that some of you enjoyed the informal networking in the lounge. It's something that we're finding increasingly interesting because that informal dimension is something that is missing so often in life. So what are today's themes? We've got three. We're going to be looking at sector trends. We're going to be looking at what's been happening over the past 6 months using the tracker. And what's really interesting today is that three of the panel, well, me included, I guess four, we're on the first ever session. We called it Sharing Challenges in those days. And that's myself, obviously, but also Francesca and Jeremy and Marion, and we'll come to that in a minute. But so we're going to look at sector trends and what have we experienced and what might that help, how that might help us. We're going to look at finance. A lot of professional firms are arguably very underfinanced in terms of their balance sheet, and that's something which Robert Hanna is going to be talking to us about from a sort of litigation funding perspective. And then finally, performance reviews. And you may wonder why the icon has got little hearts in when it comes to performance reviews, but we'll talk a bit more about that later. So who's on the panel? Just refreshing again. Firstly, in order of appearance, we've got Marion Jones, who, as you may remember, is the director of Tongues in Trees and has a long career working in primarily marketing and communication roles, but is very much now a coach and helps particularly leaders in professional firms with their business and often personal challenges, as I suspect too. We then followed by Robert Hanna, who mentioned, who's the managing director of Augusta Ventures, which is the largest litigation funding operation, if that's the right word, organization in the UK, obviously with a broader remit. Jeremy Beard, who's the managing partner of Hayes McIntyre, accountancy firm, mid-sized, one office in London, and he'll be telling us how much that's being occupied at the moment. I suspect not too much. And Francesca Lagerberg, who is our point person and has been on every single one. And she tells me next week she can't join me, so I'm feeling a bit woeful about that, but I'm sure we'll cope. And anyway, she is the global lead of network capabilities at Grant Thornton, which, as you all know, is the top 5 accountancy network in the world. And lastly, yours truly, founder chief exec of Managing Partners Forum. Delighted to be your host, and I think somebody called the anchor is a term I came across the other day. So whatever works for you, that's fine by me. I'd like to just quickly run through some of the things that I think are really, really important. And for those of you who are new, this will be interesting. For those of you who have been on the call before, you may have seen it before, but I still think it's worth just mentioning and sharing because they really are great, great insights. And they've very much been my sort of bellwether as I went through. So first of all, think big. And you really do need to believe 6 impossible things before breakfast, as Lewis Carroll memorably said. But also remember, you're the power of your relationships, and having a great book of contacts, otherwise known as a telephone directory, isn't really much use in life. It's all about reciprocity. It's about favors. It's about helping each other and going the extra mile for somebody else, creating the win-win, if you like. But you also got to think small. You've got to think about the angles that will resonate with your key audiences. Everybody's very, very busy. If you're going to hold yet another web seminar or push out another piece of thought leadership, just please, please think about who the audience is and is this really the best way to reach them? Because a lot of people have just kind of gone into knee-jerk. Actually, I don't really think about doing campaigns. We are now in the 27th episode of this series. That's a campaign. And I've got a group of people who are coming in every week, and it's wonderful. And thank you. And you almost feel part of an audience and part of where we're trying to go. So thank you for that. Do try and think about your clients. Are they an audience or are they a community? Are you really with them or not? Drop the convention. Yeah, you've got to do new things and new services. Everybody said 3 years innovation in 3 months, but have you stopped? Are you still in an innovation mindset, or are you feeling exhausted and now wanting to go back to what you think the new normal might be, but you're not quite sure? Speed is of the essence. We're probably all feeling exhausted because we've just been running at 100 miles an hour for the last 6 months or so, but you've still got to think about what you're doing. You've got to market test your assumption. You've got to articulate them. That's what strategy is fundamentally about, choices. And if those choices prove invalid, and some will, then you've got to amend them and pivot in a new direction. And that depersonalizes it. You don't want to get into board situations where everybody says, that's my strategy and that's mine, have a fight. It doesn't work. Be entrepreneurial. Keep listening and innovating. As I keep on saying, listening is the most important word in that sentence. If you're not listening to your clients, how can you be sure that you're giving them what they need? Really key point. So I'd like to thank Elena Kutsko of Globsec in Bratislava for her Wonderful thoughts. And they go back to the 7th of April, so she was certainly early in. So, slight change today. We're not going to do the poll now. We're going to do the poll we're not going to give you the feedback from last week's poll now. We're going to give you a poll now, which we're going to be doing on a topic which is quite an interesting one, really. It's called management team performance reviews. And it's a very simple question, but who actually checks that the CEO is doing a good job? Who gives them a performance review? How consistent are they? Who's responsible? How often? What are the inputs? What are the tools? What are the important aspects of those reviews? And are the links between the performance and their remuneration? They're all quite interesting issues. Now, we all spend ages talking about those issues in the context of the partners and the employees, but do we spend as much time looking at the management team and its performance? And I think one of the things that will come out of the pandemic, I'm quite sure of that, is that those firms that have got really good, effective management teams will be the ones that come out really well. And those which are a bit disorganized and haven't really brought that clarity and management discipline will be the ones that struggle. Now, I could be proved wrong, but I don't think so. Certainly when we come to our awards next year, we're going to be looking to really focus on the people who've really lifted their game and done amazing things through what, for all of us in management terms, has probably been the toughest year that any of us have experienced. So let's show the results. So what are we saying? Okay, the first question, and this is something that the panel will be talking about later, so I'm sure they'll be paying attention, as they say. How effective are leaders at your firm at agreeing objectives with members of their management team? Only 6% say that's very effective. That's a bit depressing. 58% effective, 6% ineffective, and 30% neither nor. Not sure that's a brilliant scorecard. So let's move down to the next level. How effective are management team members at your firm at agreeing objectives with those reporting to them? Very effective. 6 has now moved up to 10%. I think the same comment probably apply. Effective is higher, 71%. And the bit in the middle is dropped away a bit. So I think what they're suggesting is that the communication from the leader to the management team members leaves a bit desired, but those team members are slightly better at agreeing objectives with those who report to them. Let's see if the panel find that stacks up or not. In terms of consistency, to what extent are people actually reviewing at the end of each management project? We talk about reviewing at the end of client job, but are we reviewing at the end of our management projects? Well, sometimes it's 58%. And part of how we work is a mere 3%, regularly 30%. So I think you're going to find that probably that isn't happening to the extent it would be in a client context, for sure. Who is primarily responsible for conducting performance reviews of management team members? Managing partner, CEO comes through quite strongly, and then it's about evenly split. Interestingly, 13% of you, there's no reviews conducted at all. Now that again is probably not a very helpful. I think most people looking in life are looking for some feedback. So let's see how that works. Well, is the formal feedback happening? Well, the formal feedback on performance or progress of the management team members is 6 monthly for 42% and annually for 39%. Now, there's a lot of research which suggests that actually anything that's done as infrequently as annually or even 6 monthly is probably very, very late in the day in terms of meaningful conversations. And increasingly, people are looking at giving much more informal feedback. So let's look at that one. So how is the informal feedback happening? Well, again, the biggest here is monthly, 32%, which again, I sense for informally once a month is again probably not very adequate, I would have thought. Certainly if you're looking again about client projects and client work, you would find much more frequent conversations than that between the team leader and their team members. So, and some of them, there aren't any nevers, that's something. There were 3% of nevers for the formal, but we've still got 10% for less often annually informally. And I think that really is called working in the dark if you were somebody in the management team. So what are the main inputs when people are conducting reviews? What are the main inputs for these performance reviews? Biggest one there, quite clearly, is previously set objectives. So in other words, if something was right a year ago, it must be now right again to look at it again. Doesn't always follow. Followed by project-based feedback. Personal behavior comes through quite strongly. Otherwise, the two which are a bit behind are the job-based capabilities and the multi-source feedback. So there isn't really 360-degree feedback clearly isn't working as much in the management team as it might be in other parts of the firm, particularly around employees and partners, say. So what about tools and methods? Self-assessment is the one that just pips it, but not by much. Moderation meetings to calibrate. There are people who are doing ratings, but nobody at least is doing forced rankings. I suppose that's a relief. I mean, that shades of Enron, where if you're not in the top, if you're in the bottom 20%, you're automatically fired. That's where that can lead you if you're not careful. So, but anyway, the main one there, I think, is self-assessment forms, which of course are, well, I'm not saying they're dangerous, but people will always say, whether it's in a self-assessment form, what they think they would like the other person to hear, if they're being honest. So having moderation meetings to actually calibrate, and possibly using a bit more technology, again, that's only a quarter, which isn't very high. In terms of which aspects of the review performance do people see as being the most important? And again, there's a fairly strong winner there, which is it being designed to help people identify and use their strengths. And then just a little bit behind, but not much, the idea that people who receive frequently should get praise and positive feedback and public recognition. This, if you recall, was where the little hearts come in, going back to my icon at the beginning of the day, because there's lots of research that says the moment you say anything bad to anybody, their brain switches off, they stop listening to you. So you might as well stop the conversation there and take it up the next day when they've had a chance to reflect. We can talk a bit more about that later. And then the other one that comes through is the idea of people actually drafting their own goals in consultation with their leaders. In other words, we're not being told what to do, but you're actually influencing that agenda yourself. So what extent are these things then actually influencing reward and compensation? And possibly, again, nobody says there's no link at all. Mostly it's a strong link, but 40% of it's neither strong nor weak. So again, I appreciate that you should keep reviews separate from compensation, but at the end of the day, if somebody is not performing, then arguably their reward should follow suit. So I'll stop sharing now. I think there's lots of interesting things for the panel to reflect on. And what I'll do is I'll invite Marion to come and give us his thoughts on what he's been hearing, particularly from his clients, about how they have been dealing with this interesting world that we currently live in.
I was very interested to listen to those findings and indeed that survey. And it's a complete coincidence that I very much wanted to talk about this, about communication in a management and leadership context. Before that, I just wanted to reflect on the fact that this program has been going on for 7 months now. 7 months, which has coincided with an absolutely tumultuous time, of course, in the world at large. But a tumultuous time, I'm afraid, from an absolutely personal standpoint for myself. I hang at the bottom of the discretionary expenditure food chain as far as my clients are concerned. So back at the beginning of March, at the end of March, they effectively shut up shop as far as using me was concerned. And I wondered what this was going to mean. And slowly over the first few months, going into the spring and then early summer, I felt like someone hanging onto the edge of a precipice with my fingernails, really wondering what was going to happen. I only say this not to kind of play the violin strings and to encourage your sympathy, but to really draw attention to, in my experience, how much has changed since then. The kind of behavioral and attitudinal sea change that I'm actually experiencing, admittedly only empirically through my client base, is happening most particularly since the summer. And I'm going to focus on two areas where I've really experienced this attitudinal sea change very deeply. Not just a sea change, I think an absolutely systemic change, excuse me, in the way that our clients, my clients, view some of these challenges. Those are in terms of leadership and they're in terms of business development. So as far as leadership is concerned, I've a couple of clients that I've been running big leadership programs for some years. And it's a kind of recycling program. People continue to go through it to refresh their skills, to reflect on what they've done. And in order to accommodate the changes affected by the lockdown, I did a little survey back in the summer before restarting the program to see how attitudes had changed. And I was really surprised, very delighted, in fact, to see that their attitudes to communication have expanded. It's as if the lockdown have caused a complete fundamental reappraisal of what leadership and most particularly leadership communication is about. There seems to be a recognition that more time needs to be spent leading and communicating, that leadership is recognized, or communication rather, is recognized as a transaction. So in other words, in Obama's words, the value of communication is what is received, not what is transmitted. That more delegation, more direction, more empowerment, more autonomy is inspired because of that. And compared with pre-lockdown, the attitudes are now that the most important role as a leader, and this is a trench leader, leader of a practice group, a project leader, someone working in a team, not necessarily a kind of formal structured leader. Their role is to inspire and motivate and to create common purpose and to sense check and to ensure collaboration, transparency, and mutual understanding. And this is taking place within a context of an environment, a communication environment, which of course has been attenuated by the effect of lockdown. In other words, we're now working with the digital platforms, with Zoom or Teams or whatever, and having to adapt. So secondly, I'm noticing that people are developing a new language of communication around using these tools. Recognizing that the kind of informal bumping into the corridor, giving a nod, giving a wink, the kind of nuanced form of communication doesn't work. So I'm only alluding to these very briefly just to say that compared with the beginning of April, I am now hugely optimistic about the way that organizations seem genuinely starting to evolve and adapt systemically to the gauntlet thrown down by COVID. And very briefly, I'd add to that, I'm also experiencing similar changes in the world of business development. At a certain point, my clients are saying to me, we can't do business development, we can't network because we have no physical access to the people that we would network with. But now, to pick up Richard's earlier points, organizations, firms are running very, very powerful campaigns. And these campaigns are in turn allied with the partners using these same digital platforms to reach out in a much more intimate way to their clients. Now, I use the word intimacy advisedly. I'm sure many of you know, I'm sure Richard knows the concept of client intimacy. It's a step beyond client service, beyond client understanding. And I think that's where we're going. So I feel that there are very definitely grounds for great optimism, and I'm really looking forward to the months ahead. Richard.
And I'm sure you'll be a great navigator to your clients through that process, Marion.
Thank you.
Robert, come and tell us about your world of finance, which is a bit different than the one we've been talking about, but the whole point about this show is we don't just focus on one theme, we look at a lot of different issues during the course of our hour.
Augusta Ventures is a litigation financing house, and we provide funds to cover people's litigation costs. And over the years, we've been going probably 12 years, I suppose. Slowly, we have persuaded lawyers that we're not doing the work of the devil, and we're not ambulance chasers, and we do actually care for the claimants that we fund. But it has been a long, slow process because I don't know how many lawyers are in the audience today, but lawyers are very, very smart people, but generally when you start speaking to them about finance, most of them don't really want to know, and certainly they don't like change. They if a client is prepared to pay their hourly rate, they're very happy to go forward on that basis. But it has been a gradual change, and I think that change has really been instigated by our friends at Burford, which people may or may not know, but it certainly brought the industry to the front pages of the financial press. As a result, CFOs are aware of litigation funding. CFOs go to their lawyers and say, tell me about litigation funding. Who should we use? Should we use? What terms should we use? How much should we pay for this facility? And as a result, the adaptation or adoption of litigation financing has grown. 6 months ago, we had this dreadful virus, and things have changed dramatically. It was interesting to hear about Meirion and how he sees things change. Well, I have always been a massive advocate of working in the office and not working at home. And I always had the, which has proved to be misguided, that the view that if people are working from home, then they're not working full days, and they may well be skiving. I think this has proved, the old dinosaur that I am, that I'm wrong. And we have seen some fantastic changes. And I think we are so much more productive now than we have ever been. And that obviously is because maybe, certainly for me, I don't have to do my hour and a half daily commute, which is great. I don't have to go off to a meeting and spend half an hour navigating the tube to get to Chancery Lane, have my traditional 1 hour meeting, and then spend another half an hour coming back to the office, and thereby using up 2 hours of the day. Instead, I get on a Zoom call, and Zoom calls tend to be a lot shorter, and you can get a lot more done in those 20, 25 minutes. So that is changing. But I would say after 3-4 months, you realize that you are missing the intimacy of working with your clients, your colleagues. And it is very important. So I would be very keen if everyone decided to come back for a few days a week. We have instigate here, we do 2 days a week. We were going to 4 days a week, but then dear Mr. Johnson decided to dissuade people from doing that. So we work in the office 2 days a week, and we probably have 15 people coming in out of 50, I suppose. So it's not a huge amount, but you get a bit of turnover. And when you actually get the chance to talk to people face to face, you suddenly realize that that's important. And so, look, it's a learning curve. I don't think we'll ever go back to doing 5 days a week the way we have, which is positive. But it's a strange world we're living in. Standing back a bit and thinking more about our business, what we are seeing is that in the old days, litigation funder, we lend money on a non-recourse basis to cover legal costs. If the case loses, we lose all our money. If the case wins, we take a very modest, and a few people might argue with that, but we take a very modest share of any awards that are generated and collected, I should say. So I would say we are a risk management tool for claimants, and they can decide to take as much or as little risk off the table as they want. Now, what we're seeing, and I should say, and in the early days, this was very much the David and Goliath, the access to justice, which I actually passionately believe in, because unfortunately, if you don't have money, you can't pursue litigation, and therefore you can't pursue the litigation all the way to trial, which is tough. But what we're seeing now is it's the larger firms looking at us and realizing that we're a source of liquidity. So I spoke a couple of weeks ago to the CFO of a FTSE 100 company. They have got a large amount of cash on their balance sheet. In their words, they said they didn't want to waste their money funding litigation. And therefore, they prefer to use someone else's money because for them, cash is king. Now, who knows what's going to happen over the next 6, 12, 24 months, but everyone wants to hang on to their cash. So as far as I'm concerned, we are being seen as a separate source of non-recourse liquidity, which is quite interesting, I think. But then also what we're seeing, and again, I don't mean to trash lawyers the whole time, but they have a very interesting structure, in as much as they don't believe in keeping cash on their balance sheet. And therefore, if they're great customers who they've had relationships for years and years and years don't pay them, that's an issue. And because they are such great customers, and maybe they have corporate relationships in other parts of the firm, they don't feel that they want to pursue them in litigation to get their cash. So that's a big issue for them. And I think it's going to be a bigger issue. So again, we speak to the lawyers. Lawyers understand that if there is a big checkbook there waiting to fund their litigation, they will be paid at the end of every month, and they will have, we would argue, and this is maybe debatable, but they should have better relationships with their clients. I would also argue that they will get more business from their clients, because all of a sudden the clients can pursue claims without having to pay for it at all, or they can pursue claims that they think may have some slightly mixed merits. And if we decide that we're comfortable with that, then they can pursue cases that they may not ordinarily have followed. So I think that's me. And so unfortunately, in this day and age, I think there will be, unfortunately, more litigation. And unfortunately, there will be more insolvencies, and therefore litigation funders will be more used, unfortunately.
Which kind of suggests to me that you guys must do a lot of due diligence. You don't have to answer that. It's kind of obvious, I suspect, because of the non-recourse aspect of the funding you put forward. What I was going to do now, thank you, Robert, for that. Was really helpful, and we'll join the panel in a second. But I was going to quickly run through now something I would do a bit earlier normally, which is the findings of the poll that we did last week. And let me just find it. Hopefully that's now showing. And what I wanted to do really there was just to kind of quickly take you through what some of the findings are, so we can look back over this 6 months that we're really covering today and kind of reflect. And most of you will have seen, many of you will have done this, I think, but it's quite interesting. And I kind of had this, I think the best way to describe this one is the tongs that you use to catch the sausage in the barbecue. So we started off back in February with 80% of people expecting to expand in the year that was about to happen. And that dropped down to as low as 25% by the end of May. And at the moment, it had a funny dip about a month ago, and then it's picked up again this month. And not quite sure what the dip was, whether it was just people coming back from holiday, and we talked a bit about that on the last call with Jeremy. But either way, it has now picked up a bit. That's the message from last week. In terms of what does that mean in dip, because obviously expansion could be going from 7 up to 8 is expansion, 7 down to 6 is contraction. So what does that mean in numbers terms? There's been a steady growth of people in the none. In other words, no dip expected. That was 7%, and it's got a nice little series of steps moving up to 25% now. The one that's a bit scary, I guess, in a way, if you look over to the right and the 30% or more than half the firms were saying back in April, when they started this particular sequence, that they expected more than 30% reduction in their income in the year to come. And I would say now, talking to the firms, it's 7% is probably about the sort of number that's now emerging. That's a big move. Now, what's that done? Well, new work is now picking up, and again, this is Marion's point, I think, in a way, that's saying that people have been much more inventive in the way of reaching out to not just clients but potential clients. And but again, we saw this massive dip back in at the end of August. Everybody was just a bit not feeling very happy about life. Maybe it's now we have some clarity about working from home, who knows, but either way, we are where we are. But now, as the last time around, the blues were for the back slightly ahead of the reds. Now, sadly, that isn't going to be the same with headcount. We've seen there it wasn't going to expand as much, 60% that, but there's a consistent picture of the expansion being less than the contraction when it comes to headcount, and I think that's very much the story of the UK economy at the moment. This is really busy, so forgive, but I'll just quickly pick out a couple of things. At the bottom, alter your business model. That was actually the top back in April, because everybody was suddenly thinking, oh my God, we have to change our business model. It's now at the bottom of the list. And I think that's really what I'd take out of that. Otherwise, the things you'd expect, operational efficiency has become more important, but was always near the top. People skills and capabilities, Developing a clear purpose and strategy, that fell away, it's come back again, and increasing tech, but that's always going to be in there in the current climate. So the priorities haven't fundamentally changed since February, actually, which is quite interesting in its own right. In terms of moving possibly now to slightly more people working from home, what's that saying? Well, picking up Robert's points, around 2 days a week, nobody virtually, I think 1% or something like that, 3-4% are saying everybody's going to be back in the office. At the other extreme, everybody working from home was 24%, now 14%. So it's dropped back a bit, but it's still a number. And then you've got a big lump of people in the sort of between around half and around a quarter. That's where the bulk of it now is. So that again reflects the sort of 2-3 day week hybrid model that you were talking about. What's that doing to office space? Well, about 54% are now saying, that's the one on the left, the blue, probably about the same amount of space we'll be using, and probably that's social distancing as much as anything else. And then there's another chunk who are going for 20% or less, plus less space, and very strong messages from the City of London and others that that's having pretty heavy impact on the London office market at the moment, for example. What's holding people back? And again, this is an interesting one, picking up possibly some of Robert's points around financial health of the client base. It wasn't even on the list back in February, and it's now top. That is not something that people were even thinking about 6 months ago. And look down 4 or 5, and social distancing guidelines are the same. That didn't even exist back in February, and it's now in the top 5. So the ones you'd expect, poor economic outlook and fee pressures, the lack of client instructions, they're all ones that were kind of there before. Curiously, the ones that aren't there anymore are the lack of skills or talent, which was nudging, I don't know, 18% back in February. Sorry, excuse me, 30% then. And the employee turnover, 25%. So political uncertainty, Brexit, we're moving, is almost non-existent, because if we look at what are the 3 areas that are carrying most weight during partner direct discussions, and this is something I was showing with government yesterday, who are obviously very concerned about Brexit. Well, actually, as at October, public policy, Brexit, external threats, etc., isn't even mentioned by any of the people who completed it as being the 3 areas that carry most weight during partner discussions. As we all know, if it's not happening during partner discussions, it's not happening. So I'll leave that there. Finance and cash flow, number 1, as you'd expect, hence Robert's point. Marketing, as Marion was mentioning, client service. But I think, as Marion will be pleased to hear, it's the first time we've ever seen marketing ahead of client service or people or operational performance to do with the management of a professional service firm. I think that's a first. On which happy note, which of these statements are true for your firm? And again, what Andrew Kakubadze said last week, he said actually we should be quite proud of these numbers, and that most of the boards that he looks at, they would be very, very happy if these statements were true of their leaders. So I think on that one, slightly pat in the back too. So onwards and upwards. So I'll stop sharing and I will open it to the panel. We've got about 20 minutes. And Jeremy, what are you thinking today? Where do you think this conversation is taking us?
Very interesting. Thank you, Marion and Robert, for your contribution. And perhaps if I just give some general comments about Hayes McIntyre, and then I'm happy to pick up on specifics that have been raised during this morning. I suppose the headlines are business is good. We've just completed our 6 months to 30th of September, and those results were very much in line with budget, which was very much in line with the previous year's actuals. So, you know, in many ways, given the circumstances, given what we've gone through in the last 6 months, that's a very good result. And when I'm talking about in line with budget and actuals, I'm talking about the fees. I'm not talking about profitability necessarily. However, everyone is working extremely hard. We're particularly conscious of that at the moment, and our people certainly remain our most important aspect of our business. The interesting comment that was just made around talent and people perhaps being less concerned about that. I think for us, that remains vital and our top priority to retain our best people and to continue to recruit, if we can, very good people. So our business, I always say, our business is driven, the success of our business is driven by the quality of our people. We can then get good quality clients. We can't get good quality clients if we've got poor people. So the talent side of it remains crucial to us, and perhaps a slightly different view I have than was coming out of the survey. We were reopening in the office from the beginning of September. We'd had some good uptake over a period of about 2.5 weeks. We'd had about a third of our people had been into the office at least one day, which was pretty good. Obviously, with the change in emphasis last week from the government, that's dropped off a little bit. We were working in teams. I think we will start to go more towards a moving away from a team situation, but have a booking system so that people can go in when they want to, or when they need to, I should say. So that's good. So I think I'm generally more positive than we were than perhaps when last time I spoke. I suppose the two aspects that I would still put as a slight fear down the line is that financial health of clients and the economy. It's interesting on the survey, people being less concerned about their drop in income over the next 12 months. It's always difficult to know, are people looking at a 12-month period from now, whereas back in April we were looking at a 12-month period from then. So that has some impact. And I think the furlough scheme, which a lot of people utilised, was provided some breathing space. So actually that gave us an opportunity, because we were all a little bit fearful of what was going to happen, to sort of reduce our cost base and as a function, reduce our capacity to do work. So that provided some breathing space. Of course, what's happened is that work is now building up and now needs servicing and now needs dealing with, from our point of view, except we're a slightly different business to the lawyers. So that means what we're looking forward over the next 6 months, it looks very, very busy. So whether that is a real reflection of the economy turning round or changing, or whether that's simply the furlough scheme taking capacity out of the market, which is then all coming back in and they need servicing. So that's probably just a brief update as to where we are, Richard. Perhaps if I pause there, I'm very happy to go on in due course to talk about performance reviews and what we do and where we are with that.
Okay, let's bring Francesca in now to your thoughts on what you've heard to date and any key themes that you think were worthy of emphasising.
As always, there was tons of good stuff, Richard, wasn't there? I'm just going to pick up on a few pieces from each of the presentations, and thank you to everybody for them as well. If I look, Meirion, I thought, as always, brought real insight. When you talk about your business and how suddenly your business just stopped, I think that's something that a lot of people on this call are going to really empathise with, because I think we all had that moment where we thought, oh, will our clients still be around? Will they be able to pay their fees? Will they be able to do the things, all the transactions we had all lined up? The whole world really changed. And I think what's quite extraordinary now, 26 episodes in, is just how strong the feedback's coming through, that people have not only thrived in difficult times, they've done far more than just survive. They've really done something quite extraordinary. They've accelerated the change within their business because they've had to, or else they wouldn't have a business. And I think there's something very powerful you can always take from that, is that what have we done in the last few months that we would never have done normally? And I think there's a huge amount to take from that. And I really liked, as always, the question from Mike around, can you actually learn empathy? And I think what we're actually seeing is that businesses have to become more empathic in the way that it goes to market in current times. Because if you're having a discussion with a client and you aren't having the discussion with them about how are they coping, what's their family doing, how are they managing, what's their staff situation like, are there people managing what's going on, how are they dealing with all the various things from homeschooling to elderly relatives, if you aren't having those conversations, your clients just won't have any connection with you at all. So there's something there that's really powerful about the understanding that comes through from the way we've all had to operate, and let's hope we take that into the future. The piece that I think that then feeds through is when you come and look, and we touched on this a little bit last week, when you come back and look at this year, you need to think about this year in terms of the performance reviews, how people have done, in the context of how people have handled the extraordinary. As my old granny used to say, cream rises to the top. And in difficult times, the people really do step up, the really good people really do step up, and hopefully we'll be able to recognise that as people head into the end of year reviews that often occur on the calendar year basis. Two other quick things from me, Richard. On the litigation side, and thank you, Robert, for all of the insight there. I mean, I have no doubt that people will be looking to litigate very much more over the next few months and years, mainly because they'll need the money, and so they'll be looking to see how they can recoup things that have gone badly. But also, of course, insolvency loves a crisis, doesn't it? So there'll be, I know our insolvency wing is absolutely flying at the moment, and there's always a tragedy behind each insolvency, but it's a hugely important area, and all that reorganisation and restructuring that help people get to a better place out of a crisis is a hugely important field that professional service firms look after. So the last piece from me is actually related to the survey, and I'm going to pick up on your marketing point, Richard, because isn't that intriguing that people have suddenly I'd imagine there's a few firms that were actually around about April, May were cutting their marketing team or cutting their marketing resource in some shape or form, because that always happens. It's marketing, then it's learning, and it's usually the HR department, and on it goes. Isn't it intriguing that it's coming back? Because you have no business if you don't have work. If you don't manage to market your business successfully, you don't get the work you deserve. So I think there's a really interesting story there around that very quick cycle from let's get rid of people to, oh, actually, we might need them. So I think, Richard, you might have a few things to add on that as a bit of an expert in this area. But isn't it fascinating to see that circle go round so quickly, that loop be so fast?
I think I'll hand this one back to Marion. He's done more marketing than I have, but...
I'm not sure that's true, Richard. I've never known someone as active in the market as you in my 30 years of experience. But I was speaking with the chief exec of an IT consultancy in June this year, and it was a seminar on horizon scanning. And I traditionally thought of horizon scanning as between a kind of 3 and 5 year window. You know, you're looking to make all your material changes, shape your business model and so on, according to what's on that horizon. And his contention was, if your horizon is longer than 12 months now, then you're not horizon planning, you're just not planning. He was talking about horizon scanning and planning within a 6 to 12 month period. And I think that's just a reflection of the speed of change. So looking at business development in the context of the pandemic, it was a shock. It was a huge slap across the face with a big perch. And now, having realized just how important it is to outreach to clients, and realized too that every other firm has come to the same realization, I don't think there's ever been such a considered investment in business development as there is now. So not just rolling campaigns for the sake of creating noise, but campaigns which are geared from the get-go to get partners in front of clients, building that intimacy. And I'm seeing a kind of holistic, systematic approach to business development planning, which I frankly have never seen before. In my experience, it tends to be ad hoc, pretending to be thought leadership. Now these things really do seem to be planned. As an old US partner friend of mine said, from soup to nuts. So again, just as I talk, I feel grounds for great enthusiasm. You know, spending 30 years railing at partners for not getting the strategic value of business development, and now realizing that all it takes is a global pandemic to help them to do that.
A modest hurdle, that one, I suspect. Yeah. No, thank you, Francesca. I think what we're seeing from our marketing group, the PM Forum, is that yes, there were a lot of redundancies. Going back about 5-6 months ago, nobody was going on training courses. There was no investment in the marketing teams whatsoever, and that's completely shifted. Now we're seeing firms being rebuilt. There are certain event specialists have had to reinvent themselves a bit. I mean, there are certain areas of expertise within marketing, in particular, which have had to sort of not rethink, because actually, as a good marketing person, you can probably do a lot of different things, but the emphasis of the role has shifted within firms. But we're now seeing, again, recruiters are beginning to talk about, we're now being asked to find marketing people again, etc. And I think, if you don't have new clients, then, you will lose some every year. So it's called slow suicide. That's my way of thinking about it. Robert, come and give us your thoughts. How do you, as an organization, go about winning new work? How do you get new clients? Let's just hear that perspective for a second. You're mute again.
I'm getting used to this now. Look, it's one of three ways, I suppose. One is website. People do call us up. Traditionally or historically, it's been a very small part of the business. But as I said, with the greater realization that litigation financing exists, we are seeing more people coming to us directly. And these are the corporations who come and seek the finance. Still, though, it's the law firms, and it's as a result of having had relationships with these people for over 10 years that when they get a case, if they think it's suitable, and still a lot of lawyers, as I said, don't think many cases are suitable, and I would disagree very passionately on that, because I think every dispute, the claimant should know what the price of litigation financing is, and they should consider it. It may not be right for them, but they should certainly know what the option is. But it's still, so it's coming from lawyers. Predominantly, it's coming from lawyers, which I suppose is good. And so the key thing is to keep those relationships active. And we've spoken as a firm to over 12,000 lawyers over the last 10 years. And we have our own little CRM system that keeps track on all of that. But in the past, you would try and go and have a face-to-face meeting on a regular basis. And that regularity could be monthly at the very most, or quarterly, or maybe less than that, or often less than that. But now it's actually perversely a lot easier, because you can touch base with them. You can actually go inside their house. So all of a sudden you see them on their Zoom calls, and you have a much closer relationship. And as I said, it takes 20 minutes as opposed to 2 hours to have that meeting. So it's there's no secret to it. It's a law of numbers. We have to keep the relationship strong. It is difficult to form new relationships. I think that is true. But if you've got the existing relationship, I think it's easier to remind the people who you are, you just got to keep spreading the word, I suppose.
Thanks, Robert. Jeremy, we were going to talk, I think you offered to talk a little bit more around some of the performance review aspects that we obviously picked up in the survey today. Let's get some thoughts on that? Be really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. We're about to embark on our annual partner reviews. It normally starts around this time of year. The process anyway, and the actual review itself will happen around December, January time, I guess. We do use an outside consultant to provide some sort of confidentiality and independence in that process, which is very useful. I think there's going to inevitably be a slight change in emphasis this year, given the environment we've gone through over the last 6 months. So I think there'll certainly be a I don't want to say softer approach, but a change in emphasis. And I would certainly agree with Francesca's comment as well about people. There's certainly some people who have risen to the challenge over the last 6 months, and others that have perhaps struggled for a variety of reasons. And we need to understand that and work with them. And you know, we're not here to get the stick out. I think it's really important at the moment as well to make sure we keep regular contact with each other during the year, and it's particularly it's more important but more difficult at the moment with the level of home working, and that's across the board. That's not just partners, that's our staff as well, and we keep rethinking that. We have to keep re-engineering that. Right, what are we going to do? How can we stay in touch with people? You know, I think with all, and the comments have been made today, the cultural point within professional services firms is really important, our culture. When you're not in the office and talking to people and bumping into people and having a chat and having lunch with there is a risk you lose that, and the great thing people like about working at a particular firm can suddenly start to be lost a little bit. So, you know, we're always looking at that and always rethinking that. In terms of management boards appraisal, we've just completed an annual survey to all partners who have the opportunity to respond to certain questions and make certain comments about the management board's performance as a whole. Each management board member is then reviewed through a partner review process, the same as any other partner. So that's our sort of structure and the way in which we're looking at our reviews at the moment.
Okay, well, I think that probably gets us to that witching hour, sadly. Francesca, do you just want to give us a final thought on, you're going to miss us, we'll miss you next week, but hopefully,
I miss you guys.
You'll be back.
I miss you guys too, definitely back the week after that. I've got a call to do with China, that's the only time they could do. I think probably my big takeaway from today is that in all of that craziness that we've gone through for the last few months, there's such a huge amount of positivity and hope about the future. And despite the fact that half of the UK, for those of you sitting in this part of the world, seems to be going back into some form of lockdown, businesses are still hanging in there and are actually really coming through with far more strength than perhaps we thought we'd have in April and May. So the next few months are going to be crucial for most businesses, but at least we're seeing something very positive happening there.
Fantastic. Well, really remains me to say thank you very much to our today's panel, to Francesca, to Jeremy, to Robert and to Marion, three of whom have been with us literally since the first one on the 20th of March. I don't think any of us expected. I thought it might run till June. I did not think we'd still be doing them in October and already booking into November and beyond. All of them are available in the management library. Do go out there, and really only just to say, hope you found today valuable, and please encourage your peers to come and join us. It's a public good. We enjoy doing it. It's fun. We've had 50 plus great guests, and I think we've all got to know each other, lots of new LinkedIn connections and the rest, and I hope you as an audience find it helpful. And please next week, if you come, do try the lounge as well, because it adds a whole new dimension to what we're trying to offer. Bye for now.